United States. This is a really pretty uniquely US,
Shocker.
North American problem. You are more likely to be in the office 5 days a week if you don't live in a major metropolitan area. You're more likely to be in the office 5 days a week, depending on the industry you work in. So certain industries like professional services, law firms, financial services firms, and certain industries like utilities, people tend to be in more than not. And you're more likely to be in the office more if you are either a senior executive or you're right out of college. And I could keep going, but I think the answer is, while we can make broad brush generalizations about people are in the office or not in the office, it depends a lot on a variety of things.
Yeah, I mean, so I would start with the title, if I read it correctly, of this particular session, the challenge with return to office. Why does it have to be a challenge? Why do we create a challenge just by saying it's a challenge, right? I think it's a leadership issue at the end of the day. I think when you say 90% of companies want people back in the office, you're 100% right. And I'm surprised it's not more than that, but you got a handful of outliers out there. And when Google, who can work from wherever they want, has woken up and realized that collaboration and innovation only happens with collaboration, and collaboration really happens best when human beings are interacting with one another on a face-to-face basis, it's only a matter of time before CEOs wake up and realize that their shareholders and their bottom line is greatly affected and impacted by the fact that they allow human beings to tell them what they're going to do. And team members matter, right? This is not an all or nothing situation, but if you're not back in the office, your business is suffering and will continue to suffer, in my humble opinion.
One thing that struck me in that poll was by the end of 2024, that's 13 months away.
Why, what are you waiting for, right? What are you waiting for?
Yeah. So lots of articles about what a challenge it has been. You talked about it, but so why has it been such a challenge to get people back on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, I think, we talk about return to office, which is a unfortunate name if you're me in the office business, but I actually think the return to office challenge is a rejection of a lot of things, right? And it depends, again, on the person and the company. It's people rejecting toxic cultures. It's people rejecting bad bosses. It's people rejecting companies that don't invest in their learning and their growth and their career success. It's people rejecting long and difficult commutes. It's people rejecting uncompetitive pay. And yes, sometimes it is a rejection of, offices that look like they are straight out of, 1974. But I really think it's about the holistic workplace experience. So if you're a business leader, I think the question you should be asking is not just thinking about the literal office, but thinking about, what is the holistic value proposition I'm offering to my people? And why would, that talented young person or my own kid, right, graduated from college, how am I going to make the case that this is the place they want to invest their time and their talent? And I think we have to be asking ourselves about all of those things to make sure we're making the choices and making the investments that we need to make, whether it's in culture or pay or learning opportunities or physical spaces.
I mean, that's very, very well said. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to the culture of the organization, right? And people, what I found over time is that people want to work with and inside of an organization that actually cares about them, treats them with respect, but on the flip, actually holds them accountable, right? And I think, human beings by their very nature are short-term thinkers. And so in the short run, it was better for me to be able to work at home, right? I look at 20 and 21 for us from a pandemic perspective. We were tremendously effective and efficient, right, at doing the day-to-day work. But what we lost was that camaraderie. What we lost was a piece of the culture of the organization, which has been so important to us over the years. And so, clearly, it's an ecosystem, right? The company, Dan used to say this all the time, love your people, love your clients, right? If you love your people, they'll take care of your clients. If your people take care of your clients will take care of you as an organization. It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship, right? But for your clients or for your people to truly understand what it means to take care of your clients, it's really hard to get that over a screen.
Love your people, love your clients, and love your boots. Tell us about your boots.
So back in the day, when I first became the CEO of the organization, I had some boots, and my wife was not a fan. She said, you can't be the CEO of a company and wear cowboy boots to work. I used to wear them with everything, suits, everything, right? I don't know what happened, but about a year ago, she met this designer who does all kinds of cool stuff, and she liked the boots. She made me a pair, and I couldn't be happier. They're the most comfortable boots I've ever owned in my life. And you know what? It took me 25 years to be able to say I was right.
All right, Harvard Business Review, it found that teams working in the same physical location, and we started to talk about this, were more likely to exchange ideas and build trust than remote teams. So we're talking about collaboration, innovation. What are you seeing in your companies?
It's a fact. The Harvard Business Review, I mean, they're decently smart humans, right? They do a bunch of data, they crunch data, they look at information. Some may say they're not quite as smart as they used to be, but that's a whole separate issue. But the reality of life is, all you have to do is take a look at some of the data that you've already represented. But if you're inside of your own companies, right, and you're walking around, you guys have figured out return to office. You're sitting in this room. You came down here for this event, right? So I think at the end of the day, we make more of it than it really is. And you have to find a way to communicate to your team members the value, right, to your point. It's the holistic value, and I know we'll get in and talking about this a little bit, but culture is, it's philosophy, it's how you think about an organization, but it's also your environment, right? And your environment is the space that you work in. And so, I've talked to a lot of people about their return to office situation. If you're not thoughtful and intentional about how it's going to operate, it will fail. Because you can tell people, well, come in 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 4 days a week. You pick when you want to come in. And you get a handful of people in on Monday and a few people in on Tuesday, and people are walking around going, there's nobody here. What's the point of me being here? I might as well work from home. So think about it. Clearly consolidate it so that when you are in the office, you are literally bumping into other human beings. That's the whole point, right? But it's amazing how many companies haven't even gone to that level of saying, okay, it's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or it's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, or it's just going to be Wednesday. Whatever it is, start somewhere, but have human beings around to interact with.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I mean, you beat me to it. I was thinking about all of you. I mean, we've got our friends at Detroit Public Television who are live streaming this, so you could be not here and watching this, but you chose to be in this room. So I think that's worth reflecting on. And just to build on your comments, I actually just read something this weekend. Maybe some of you saw it. It was in the news that a group of neuroscientists at Yale just published new research in Imaging Neuroscience Journal. And they basically studied and did kind of brain scans of people who were having conversations over, Teams or Zoom, and then people who were having conversations in person together. And they found that when you're in person, every part of your brain lights up as being engaged, whether it's all your senses are being activated in the way that you're, picking up on various cues. And they found that when you were having that same conversation but through a screen, one little tiny part of your brain lit up, but that was it. So it was interesting, and I haven't, I just saw this in the news, but it makes me think we are fundamentally hardwired as humans to just in-person interaction is different. And all of our technology friends in the office, people like John, I mean, we love these tools and we're so grateful that we have tools like Teams, but they aren't going to replace the richness of an in-person interaction for building trust, for building social connection, for picking up on all the things that you pick up on when you're there that you can't see through the device.
We keep dancing a little bit around the periphery of corporate culture, so I'm going to skip ahead because I think I want to dig into this a little bit. So we've got the work from home crowd, the return to office crowd, the mix of that. We've got baby boomers with Gen Xers, with Gen Z, so intergenerational stuff. Then you've got the whole political divisiveness that's happening all over the place. That's affecting corporate culture, and that's a huge challenge. So have you had to adapt since we've come back to the office? Have you had to adapt your corporate culture? And if not, how have you maintained it? Let's start with Sara.
Yeah, I think, we've definitely had to think, I would say not changing our culture, but thinking more intentionally about how do we activate our culture in new ways. And I talk to a lot of other business leaders who are in the same spot that Steelcase is, where when you start to count up how many of my employees joined my company after March of 2020, it's actually like a shockingly large number. Even at a company like Steelcase, where we pride ourselves on low turnover and people come, they like it, and they stay. And so when you think about that, you're like, I've got like 40% of my white collar workforce that doesn't know what before was, right? And the people who've been around, we're like, yeah, we know, we remember the thing and the this and the that. Like everyone's got that shared memory. But I'm like, okay, but now 40% of us don't have that shared memory. And especially for people who joined during the beginning of the pandemic when we were all remote, thinking about how do you amplify parts of your culture, how do you work even more intentionally to make them real through events, engagements, actions, the ways that we demonstrate, and try to remind ourselves, how do we put a spotlight on that? We've really had to think about that in new and different ways, because we have a lot of people, they're new, they didn't have the typical onboarding because they joined when we were all at home, all those kinds of things. So, and I think a lot of organizations are asking that question too. It's like, how do we become more intentional? Not necessarily changing our culture, but what are the things we can do that can really symbolize our culture in ways that people can get their arms around it and experience it?
Yeah, Bill, when people think of the rocket companies, you guys have been a little more public about your corporate culture. So I guess same question for you. Have you adapted? Have you maintained it?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that Dan Gilbert is a genius in many ways, but one of the things he was really smart about is being intentional with a culture very, very early, like when we had 300 or 400 people, right? And creating little pithy sayings called isms. And they've operationalized themselves over the years into the culture that we have as an organization. So I've been involved in situations where you have to either tear one down or start to build a new one when you've got bad habits already. So starting early, anybody who's a small business or an entrepreneur, if you're not thinking about it, think about it, because it matters early in. And the reality of life is I think a culture is constantly evolving, right? Human beings are changing. Demographics are changing. The core of who we are as a company has not changed. The core culture of taking care of clients, taking care of people, empowering human beings to give their best inside of the office, to hear from people, to actively, honestly want to hear people's thoughts and ideas is a massive part of what a good culture is all about. It's how people become engaged, right? And we do all kinds of surveys and we measure engagement. And it was interesting, in the beginning of the pandemic, engagement was at an all-time high because I think people just rallied. Right? They didn't know what the hell was going on in the world, right? And they rallied, and then sooner or later, it started to ebb, and it started to flow, and it started to drop off a little bit. So you've heard Drucker, you've heard all kinds of people say culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a fact. It's an absolute fact. You can have the best technology, you can have the best marketing, you can have the best strategy. If you don't have good people who are lit and want to do something, it doesn't matter, right? So yes, to your point, the pandemic, we literally, during that time frame, 40% of our new team members in the organization as a result of that. Now, the mortgage market was crazy at that time, right? But we changed the way that we onboarded. We had to. It had to be done virtually. And and Dan and I would do literally full day sessions. We called them ISM and Action Days. And every team member that went through it, we would take them through who we are as an organization. Not what we do, who we are. So that you could understand that. Because if you can understand who we are, then you can go make decisions. Because you can't have the two eyeballs of the chairman or the CEO making all the decisions. You need people on the ground who understand who you are to be able to do that. And so when that ebbed it down to a virtual process, and it went from a full day to a half day, it was hard, right? But there was nothing you could do. We made the best of it that we could. Since we've been back, it's back to its usual self. We're doing it now every 6-8 weeks. We're doing it in person, and it makes such a massive difference to be able to understand the organization. And that's something that we have chosen to be thoughtful about for years, and will continue to do so because it matters.
I want to talk about productivity. And so certainly, Sara, how people use the office has changed. And with it, the ways that company have long tracked productivity. So how should we as business leaders look at productivity today?
Yeah, I think what I've observed is a really, interesting potential disconnect between how individual contributors or employees might think of productivity versus how business leaders or CEOs may think of productivity. And I think for sure if you're if you're trying to measure individual productivity, especially when it comes to doing like very discrete tasks, then for sure. Like if you just say, Sarah, you're just gonna have 8 hours to sit at home by yourself with no interruptions and churn through email, I can get a heck of a lot of email done and I can count it. But I haven't really contributed anything to organizational productivity. So I think when this great debate about are we more productive or not, I think there's a huge difference between discrete tasks and individual level productivity versus is the company getting better? And how are people contributing to the company getting better through things that are processes that unfold over time? Again, it's like building trust, it's innovation, it's mentoring, it's learning. Like I can't just say, well, I mentored somebody because I can count, well, I had 5 lunches with 5 employees, so therefore my productivity score is 5. Like these are processes, social processes that unfold over time. So I think, yes, if you want to just count, did I get more emails done? Or did I read that document with a bit more focus because I was at home? Yes, but that's not really what we're trying to drive in our organizations. And so I think from an organizational productivity, it goes back to all of the things you were just talking about. It's like we need to be together and we fundamentally need to connect and be engaged and have that sense of trust, social fabric, and team that allows us to do important things.
Yeah, Bill, how about you?
So a question for the folks in the room. How many of you have been on a virtual meeting? How many of you multitask while doing so? Don't lie. There's no way you can be as productive doing that as if you are sitting in an office, in a meeting, interacting with another human being, because we can see you. We know when you're on your phone or you're doing something different, right? So the fact that the sheer fact that people believe that they're more productive at home, where the productivity, I think, gain comes in is I don't have to drive to and from.
Yeah.
You know what? I used to be as productive in the car on the way home as I was in the office because it's a matter of using that time. And one of the things that you lose in this equation, and I was talking to some of the youth earlier about this, relationships matter. Really hard to develop a relationship with somebody over your phone, a bunch of likes, no, it doesn't work that way. It's literally human interaction, and we are hardwired that way.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Anybody that tells you that they're better off sitting at home by themselves in their basement, they're just fooling themselves, right? Yes, people can be introverted, they can be extroverted, but we are a social creature by nature. And the inability to be able to interact with others, actually, if you think about the health and well-being of your team, it's all the more reason to start making sure that people are coming into the office, because being isolated typically is not good for a human being.
I want to take this in a different direction, and Sara, you're here. I want to talk about office design and how that's changed. So office design is witnessing one of the biggest rethinks maybe forever,
Yeah.
right? So what's the biggest change that you and your team see in the projects that you're working on?
Yeah, well, I think the great thing is like so many aspects of what we've all been doing post-pandemic, we've been thinking really intentionally about things that maybe we just took for granted before. So I see people asking really intentional questions like, okay, if we have this building, like why? Like let's remind ourselves, what did we want people to do when they got here, and why do we have this place? Which I think has been fantastic. And so I think, at the start of earlier in the pandemic, when people were first starting to bring people back to the office, there was a phase, and maybe some of you kind of were part of this or experienced this, a phase of, well, people will do their individual work at home, and then they will come in only to collaborate. So instead of having kind of the office as we know it, we will just have a huge space that's just collaboration spaces. And if there is anybody who knows how to plan their day so perfectly that they can line all their meetings up on one day and all their individual work on a different day, then I want to know who you are because I need to know how to do that. But like it was like you can understand where the thought came from, but it didn't work. Because even if you say, well, I've got a workshop all day, so I'm going to show up to go to the big team workshop, well, there's still breaks. I need to step out. I need to make this important work call, or I need to take this call from my doctor's office, whatever. I mean, the ebb and flow of work is not like, we collaborate here and then we do individual work there. So what we've seen since is organizations really thinking hard about what do we want people to do? And a lot of it comes back, we want people to connect. So in addition to seeing collaboration spaces, team spaces, project spaces, we're seeing so much more in terms of social spaces and spaces that allow you to, you know, have a more relaxed posture. It's like the, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee and let's chat and talk about, you know, whatever it is we need to talk about. And I think it's been great to see that even some of the clients that before the pandemic were maybe the most conservative and traditional in terms of workplace design, where they were like, we would, you know, never have a lounge, we would never have a coffee bar, we would never have kind of that like fun stuff. Even those kinds of organizations are recognizing that creating places for people to just come together and be humans together is a really important part of what makes organizations work. So we're seeing a lot more of that. And then maybe the last comment I would make, like privacy is a huge deal, right? So I think we're getting to a better place now than we ever got to back before the pandemic in the, you know, period of like open office, because we do want to be out and about and with our teams or in the hallways or visible for some parts of the day. But then there are other parts of the day where I'm like, I need to have that confidential conversation with an employee, or I need to be talking about, you know, some sensitive topic, or I just need to focus. I need to work on, you know, my board of directors document, and I just need to be like left alone to get that done. So we're seeing a lot more interesting ways that organizations are putting in small spaces, enclaves, phone booths, pods, like ways to create privacy on demand than we saw before the pandemic.
If I might, I mean, I'm not the design guy by any stretch of the imagination. Thank God for my wife. But we have been fortunate. We have a company inside of our family of companies called Pop House, and they do office design. And they do a phenomenal job. To your point, we started in 2018 starting to reimagine what the office would look like, right? And we did a whole bunch of surveys, and we collected a bunch of data, and we started to go down a path, and then the pandemic hit. And in that process, when the pandemic hit, what we did is we took advantage of the fact that people weren't in the house, and we redid everything, right? And we redid it in a manner that was similar to what you were talking about, but also respected the fact, and I'm looking at Emily, who's coaches in our, inside of our company, and she's out on the floor with her cube, but we have coaching offices, right? We have private rooms where people can go actually sit down and have a one-on-one conversation. So the design of the space, back to environment, is so critically important, right? And that's what you guys do a phenomenal job of. So, but it's important. You have to, if you're running a business and you're not thinking about that, that's part of the reason you have a challenge.
Let's stay with Bill. You guys are so invested in the city of Detroit, and again, we thank you for everything you and your team have done. But it's so important to you to have your team members here in the city, patronizing restaurants, services, things like that, stores. How's that factored into your in-office policies?
It's part of every thought process that we have when it comes to what we do. And it's how we think about it, but it's also how our team members think about it. Because, you know, there's a purpose to folks coming to the city of Detroit. There's a purpose that was created in what we do. And if you think about any organization that really has an engaged culture, folks care about their communities. They care about the purpose of the organization, right? So it goes into everything that we think about. And you know, every chance I get, and I think we have a tremendous civic leadership group is from the companies that are part of Detroit. I really do. I think people care about it and they think about it. But I still have some of my brothers and sisters in the leadership ranks of organizations that need to re-engage their folks and get them back down here. A, it's better for them, it's better for their bottom line, but yes, it's better for the city that we call home. And you know, you think about the small business person, right, who counted on and counts on it. And frankly, and we look at the data, and it's really come back quite a bit. Daytime, not quite as much, but nighttime downtown, there's still a great vibe, a ton of great restaurants. And so people don't just come down to go to a ball game and go home anymore. They literally come down and they stay and they engage. And so I would ask anybody that's out there in the community that is thinking about, should I come back or should I not? Please do, it matters.
I can tell you this, if you want to come downtown to a restaurant on a Friday or Saturday night or Sunday night, you better have a reservation because you're not getting in.
Or you better know John Fickney.
All right, so I've got time probably for one more question before we bring Rich back up here. Let's look into the crystal ball, if we can. The needs of
I thought it was broken.
It's never
It's
broken.
not broken?
Yeah. Needs of employers and employees are always evolving. So if you allow yourselves to look ahead, what's the office look like in 5 to 10 years?
Well, I would say that, first of all, I think we are sort of, at the end of the full-time at-home experiment, unless you are kind of a really outlier company. But I think we're just at, the beginning of the middle, so to speak, when it comes to this grand kind of journey that we're all on together in terms of thinking about work. And I guess I would answer your question maybe talking less literally about the office, but hearkening back to what I said before, which is that I think the most, the most promising silver lining that has come out of the pandemic is that it is challenging all of us as business leaders to ask those really tough questions of ourselves, like, am I doing the right thing by my people in all these different dimensions? And if I'm not, what do I need to do differently? So I think the sort of the reflection, the deep thinking, the intentionality that we are bringing to those questions today is far greater than what it might have been, say 5 years ago. So exactly where that gets us in 10 years, I can't predict. For some companies, it might be completely rethinking their compensation and benefits programs. For others, it might be doing the really hard work of saying, hey, our culture isn't what we need it to be, and we're going to do the hard work to evolve it. For some, it might be their physical spaces and evolving and changing their physical spaces. But I think, in the end, I think where I hope that gets us in 10 years, like a really terrific and better value proposition for, all of our people.
Yeah, and I know, Bill, you watch Fed Chair Jerome Powell intently for his interest rate drops because that greatly affects Rocket Mortgage. But that's near term. You also allow yourself to plan ahead and look ahead.
Well, we try to. I mean, every time somebody asks me the question, where will we be in 5 years or 10 years, I always ask them, go back 5 years and ask yourself, would you have possibly predicted where you are today 5 years ago? No. So no one really knows. The prognosticators don't know. But the reality of life is it relates to where we are from a work perspective. I actually think my personal opinion, we're starting to get into the later innings because people are starting to realize that it has to happen, right? It just has to be a part of what you do. What will it look like? I don't know if it's going to look a ton different. I mean, I think most organizations now have some hybrid process, right? Most organizations have people in the office 2-3 days a week, and they're home 1 or 2 days a week, right? And to your point, some like JP Morgan has been required to be back 5 days a week for quite a while. Jamie Dimon just doesn't care, right? Get back in the office. I think that's true anyway. Anyway, the reality of life is I think you will see more and more of that happening. It's already starting to happen. People that say they're waiting until the end of 24 are just delaying a process that they need, a decision that they need to make. And so I think 10 years from now, you had remote team members prior to the pandemic. We did. Most companies did, right? You're going to have remote team members for the foreseeable future. The question is that the majority or the minority, right? And I really believe it's going to be a smaller percentage of your population as you continue to move forward.
How about if we thank these guys for a terrific conversation? And now we're going to turn it over to Rich.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Bill, Sara, we've got questions that came in from the audience, so I'll do my best to relate them to you and give you both a chance to reflect and answer on them. The first one is for Sara. What is the one most important comment you can make to corporate America for the reason for everyone to get back to the office today?
I think it's culture. I mean, I really do think it's culture. I think our job as leaders is to cultivate a culture that's going to allow our business to succeed. So if we're letting that happen at random, you can choose to come, you can choose to stay home. I think we don't ever get there. So for me, it's culture.
Bill, in your company, you stressed earlier today that built a culture and that requires people to come back into the office. As you have talented people within your company that want to work from home and flexibility, how do you help share with them the vision that they need to be consistent with the culture and be back into the building?
It's a great question. I think the reality of life for us is we've been fortunate that most of the people that are in the organization understand that culture and they understand. We were talking earlier. There's a statement to someone who much is given, much is expected. Right? It's a two-way street. A company gives a lot. a team member gives a lot, right? So there has to be a mutual respect associated with that. But what I've found over time is that as long as people understand the ground rules, they understand the organization, they understand the culture, and they understand the contribution that they make, and that their being in the office impacts others in a positive manner, they want to have that effect. They want to have that impact. Does it have to be every day? No. But even folks that are remote, we bring in periodically to make sure that they are coming in and interacting with their peers so that it's not just a face over a screen. It's important.
We've all been exposed to and reading about AI, artificial intelligence, as the next wave that's upon us. How do you both see that impacting your companies as it relates to people also working in the office? What role do you believe AI is going to have in your company and the work that's done in the office?
I think it's going to be a game changer. I really do. I think it's going to make people more effective. You're going to be able to do things at a speed that you haven't been able to do them before as it relates to writing code and doing other things. It's a little bit of the Wild West. I mean, you just saw an executive order come out that didn't really say anything, but the reality of life is they're fired up about it, but they're worried about it at the same time. But, like anything else, done correctly, it's going to have a massive impact on life. It's going to have a massive impact on business. It's going to have a massive impact on people's health and how you diagnose and what you do. And so this would be one that I would say, don't be an ostrich. Don't put your head in the sand. It's coming, right? And the question is, how do we make sure it's done correctly?
Yeah, well said. I mean, we've been doing a lot of different things with AI across the company for a number of years, or sort of earlier, less sophisticated versions, and I think it will be absolutely a game changer for everyone. I mean, we're using kind of AI-based systems in our factories, with our hourly workforce. I mean, so it's really pervasive across the company, and I think it's going to change, what jobs get done and the skilling or the skills that are required, of our people. So again, to me, it's all about not just how do we use AI, but how are we thinking about talent development, upskilling, capability building within our organizations. Like, how are we building and continuing to build the workforce we need to be successful? So I spend a lot of time on that topic.
Sure, I'm going to follow up with you. We have learned that Bill and his company has a strong culture and a return to work approach, and people working in the office. But you work with a lot of other companies, throughout the United States. What trends are you seeing with these companies where 90% would like to return to work, but what are you seeing in the street? What are your people seeing across the country within these other organizations?
Well, for sure, I mean, and kind of where we started the conversation, absolutely, pretty much every organization we work with, they are trying to get their people back, and if their people are back, they're trying to get them back more. And the other thing that is absolutely clear to me anyway, based on kind of that sample set, ties back to something you said earlier, which is that in the beginning, it was a lot of times it was like, just come in 2 days a week, like pick your day. Or it was like, everyone come in Wednesday, but then, pick whatever your second day is. And I think a lot of organizations have realized, for exactly the reasons you said, that then you get this random assortment of people on different days. And so we think of it now as being more like a modified work week. So if the old work week used to be Monday through Friday, the new in-office work week is Tuesday through Thursday or Monday through Thursday or whatever it is. But on those days, everybody is in, because people just feel like that's the power. Just like you said, you don't want to make the commute and come in and say, well, gosh, like I decided to come in today, but Bill didn't, and I was really hoping I'd bump into Bill.
Well, think about it. I mean, team members are smart, right? I mean, if you want to take away an excuse or a reason not to come in, then don't have them be the only person in the office, because why would they come in, right? Figure out how you can get a good nucleus group of human beings that are going to be around, and that takes away one of the excuses.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This question came in. I think it's interesting. What struggles have you both faced as leaders as we've come through COVID and you've wanted to set a tone for bringing people, back into the office? Maybe some that you were expecting to face, from, a struggle, and maybe some that were surprising to you as we all came out, of COVID.
Listen, I think out of the gate, people got so comfortable at being home, right? That the initial foray into, hey, guess what? We're coming back to work, just automatically received pushback. What about my safety? What about my health? But still a little bit of vagueness on what was going on as a result of it. But what we were able to do is listen, but also lean in and just say, okay, I hear you. We're going to start here. Once you get there, right? It's like anything else. Once you get somebody's foot in the water and the water's okay, the rest of them start to come in. The rest of their body starts to go into the water, right? So it's a little bit of it was a little bit of a process. But the other piece was we started to talk to the people that were coming into the office, and we started to get feedback from them. And their engagement levels were so much higher than the folks that were at home that you actually start to take that data and information and talk about it and start bringing more people. And sooner or later, it's like anything else, it's a process. You just don't snap your fingers and say, I demand you all to be in the office 5 days. It doesn't work, right? Just human beings, they're intelligent. They have a thought process, right? How do you get them step by step? It's like training, right? People talk about training. Giving someone a piece of information one time is not training. Training is a repetitive process over and over again. That's why teams practice. That's why you go through dress rehearsals for it. It's a process, right? And you just have to make sure that you take the right steps in that process. And when you do, you'll get there faster than you think.
I think for us at Steelcase, it was sort of an interesting journey that is maybe a little different than other companies, given that the office is our business. We didn't have maybe the challenges that some companies have in trying to convince their employees of the power of space. But what for us was interesting was that even before the pandemic, for a long time, we'd had a pretty flexible workplace policy. And so we would talk about, like most people will be in the office most of the time. Sort of like the office is your default place. We expect you're going to be there, but if you have a reason not to be there, that's cool. That was what we did for 10 years before the pandemic. So early in the pandemic, we said, as soon as it's safe and appropriate to do so, we're just going to go back to that. And so what was interesting for me as a leader and like a brand new CEO at that time was that I suddenly had a small but not zero population of employees who were like, yeah, but tell me how many days that is. And I would say, well, you never asked how many days it was before the pandemic, so I'm not going to tell you now. And then they would say, well, yeah, but, when you say, most people in the office most of the time, how do you define most? And I was like, I'm still not going to tell you, because we've talked a lot about being a culture that's trust-based. We said, you're an adult, I'm an adult, and, I'm going to trust that you know where you need to be and what you need to do, and, that's the only way this is going to work. And if I start telling you, you need to be here these many days or on these days, then that kind of breaks down kind of the way that we've thought at Steelcase about trust. So I still think I've got employees who are like, but Sara, just give me a number. And I'm not going to give them a number and see if I can kind of outlast that. But so,
I love the approach. I love it.
That's a great question to end on. Great questions, everyone in the audience. Great answers for the two of you. So
thank you.
We're going to move to our lightning round. So I'm just going to ask you one simple question. You just come up with the first answer that pops to your head, and we'll get to know you.
That's frightening.
We'll get to know you a little bit more. First, something on your bucket list. Bill, we'll start with you.
Oh, man. Something on my bucket list. I don't have anything that pops right into my head. I've been pretty fortunate to be able to do some cool stuff, so I don't have one that pops right into my head.
Bucket list is intact and complete. Sara.
I have my kids' bucket list because my son was sort of a COVID graduate, never got to do the graduation party, graduation stuff. And they said, oh, well, we'll take a great spring break trip that year. And then so every year that passes that we haven't taken the trip that we should have taken 3 years ago, the trip becomes grander and grander. So now it is going to Japan to powder ski. So I keep telling my son, I was like, okay, someday we will do the bucket list trip of skiing in Japan.
Pretty soon you're going to be going to Mars.
I know.
Favorite baseball, not baseball, that's my
Milwaukee Brewers.
Milwaukee Brewers.
Team?
Favorite sports team, Bill?
Sports team or baseball team?
Sports team.
sports team? Well, it would have to be the Penn State Nittany Lions. Otherwise, it would be the Detroit Lions.
The Detroit Lions.
Okay. I grew up in Milwaukee, so I'm a Lambeau Field green and gold girl, but hopefully you'll let me stay here.
And by the way,
for a few
this
more
is
minutes.
not. This won't be popular in this room, but when it comes to basketball, it's got to be the Cleveland Cavaliers.
What profession, other than the current one you hold, would you like to try if given a chance?
When I retire from this job, I really want to be a barista. Because just working like a regular schedule and then giving people coffee that makes them happy feels like a really meaningful contribution to the world.
This is going to sound crazy, and I've spent enough time in a courtroom to know, but I wouldn't mind being a litigator.
Ooh.
Oh, litigator. Being in Motor City, your first car.
First car?
First car.
First car was a 1968 Firebird.
Oh.
Nice.
Mine was a baby blue 1984 Buick Century.
A very safe car.
And then in my very first job, I left my job to go out to my car, and there was a lock that had been pulled out of the door and a pile of glass where my car used to be. So that was how that car met its end.
Okay, last question. If you could give some advice to your 25-year-old self, what would that be?
Pay attention, listen. The world doesn't owe you anything. Have a great attitude, work your tail off, and things will take care of themselves.
Good. I would say balance all that ambition and drive and sense of urgency to change the world with like some patience. Like life, hopefully, we're all so lucky that life is long and we get to do a lot of things. So just like mix in a little bit of patience.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today. Steve, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you, everyone. Great questions.
Thank you,
Great.
Rich.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Sara and Bill. You are welcome back here anytime. We look forward to your next visit. Appreciate all of your time. Rich, thanks for your time and talents and your ongoing support of the Detroit Economic Club. Thanks to WJR. I see you folks back in the room. It's great to have you with us. And ladies and gentlemen, tell your friends and colleagues to join the Detroit Economic Club. We're a pretty cool group of people. So on time, every time, this meeting of the Detroit Economic Club is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank